Hey guys, it's Alex from 7th Hour Films, back again with Merlin. Last time on Merlin, we had the Labyrinth of Gedriff. Merlin and Arthur were out on a hunt, as they normally do, when they encountered a unicorn, and Arthur immediately murdered it. This brought a plague upon Camelot, and specifically Arthur. Technically, it was, against Arthur. You get the idea. There was a plague that was brought against it, all the grain and all the food gone, water gone, and Arthur was put through a lot of morality tests, which ended with the poison cup challenge of trying to see which cup was poisoned. That's actually what it is. And either Arthur would drink it or Merlin would drink it, but then they came up with a solution, and Arthur drank it. Luckily, it wasn't actually poisoned, and it has been deemed now that Arthur has a pure heart. So he lived, and the unicorn was cool, and the unicorn lived at the end, which was kind of weird, but whatever. And now we move on to the final 2 episodes of Season 1 of Merlin. This is the penultimate episode. Will this be a 2-parter? Who knows? Well, the only way we can know is to actually watch the episode. Now, in order for you to watch my reaction, if you would like to watch my reaction, which I assume you want to watch my reaction, because that's why you're on this video, you actually can't watch my reaction in this particular video. Because of copyright issues and stuff like that, the reaction cannot be posted here. If you want to watch watch my reaction to this episode of Merlin, my nice 10-minute highlight with the nice footage in the corner, you can go down in the description or to the pinned comment in the comments section. There'll be a nice little link there. It'll say Merlin 1x12 reaction highlight. And if you click on that link, you'll be taken to Google Drive, where you will be able to watch my 10-minute highlight reaction. It's all nice and good. Excuse me. And once you're done with that, if you would like, and it would be very much appreciated, you can hop back over to this particular video where I will be doing the discussion for this episode. It's always a real help if you can watch the discussion too. If you're not terribly interested in the discussion, I don't know, mute the YouTube player and go do something else, Go to open up a different tab. Just leave the discussion playing for a while, if that's alright with you. It means a lot to me. Alright, with that being said, let's get right into this episode of Merlin. Here we go. Okay. Man, pumping out these great episodes. I like that. Oh, man. Fucking Merlin, man. This show has proven to be so interesting, I have to say. When we started this show, I was like, okay, this is interesting, I like it, but it's like, okay, this is kind of, maybe not exactly like, the Sarah Jane Adventures, but it's kind of like, okay, this is a family show, but maybe geared towards, more younger kids. It's not going to be, and this is the show we had following Game of Thrones, so I was like, okay, it's not going to be like Game of Thrones level, and I don't think it is still, but man, these episodes are really, they're getting really good. They're proving me, they're astounding me from what we had at the beginning of the season. I'm thinking they're pumping out great episodes now. The show has changed my mind, basically, on what I thought the show was going to be. If that makes any sense. Kind of. Okay. So this was not a 2-parter. Now, I do believe we have 2-parters in the future. And the only reason I kind of know that is because I have an entire spreadsheet of my schedule, what episodes go up when, and I put them, week by week. And so when I fill in all the episode titles for Merlin, I do notice 2-parters every once in a while. But none this season. No 2-parters in season 1. which I thought they might do a 2-part season finale, but nope, this ended up being its own thing. No Nimue, which is interesting. Because I'm still assuming that Nimue is sort of our season villain, although I suppose Nimue could be an overarching villain for the entire show, but I have no idea. So, has that been there this whole time? Sorry, got a dog hair. Okay. So, let's go over the notes. The first thing I wrote down was magic and gold. I thought that was kind of interesting, starting off just, transforming magic into gold. Magic into gold? What am I, stupid? Transforming lead into gold, and that's how we brought in everything with Gwen's dad. Not exactly a Gwen episode in this one, although I guess you could kind of say it's half and half. This episode did, at the beginning, it's okay, it's all about Gwen and her father and stuff like that, but as it kept going, it's no, this is more about Morgana now. It's this is more about Morgana, and then it's well, but then also here's all this stuff that Merlin is actually going through, So I guess it was pretty, I suppose it was pretty equal between the three of them, Gwen, Morgana, and Merlin, that, I suppose it was pretty even between the three of them. They all had to go through their own thing. It's just that Gwen's was more towards the beginning of the episode and Morgana's was towards the end, and Merlin was kind of, I guess he was more middle to end as well, because he was going through his whole thing about should he let Uther die, which is an interesting concept, He needs to take a fucking break from the dragon. That dragon gives him no advice anymore. Just fucking let Uther die, bye. And it's just alright. So, alright, so we got Therrien. I'm gonna pull up the cast list. Oh, that's spelled differently, damn it. Alright. Tom. I assume Tom would be Gwen's father, since Gwen's father is not on here in any other way. So, known for Merlin. Well done. All right. Not a lot of Arthur in this episode, I have to say. Which is interesting. But I mean, how could you fit Arthur into there? I will say, despite the fact that, Arthur is not really in this episode too much. I mean, he's there for, specific scenes. He makes his... He does have a semi-important, sort of position where, because he has to uphold the laws of Uther, but for the most part, he was only in a couple scenes, so, okay, but, so, we got Therrien in this as our villain, although technically Morgana sort of took up the villain role as well. But Therrien was our main villain who wanted to create tons and tons of gold, basically. He wanted to transform metals into gold. Which I'm not entirely sure. Okay, so we're just going to have to go into this immediately. Let's talk alchemy. Let's talk alchemy, which is interesting. So, alchemy, now grant, I have little to no knowledge of alchemy or anything. Alchemy, I guess I kind of knew, well, I kind of just assumed it related to magic. And, I kind of assumed it related to magic, and it's one of those things, it's okay, this is something that is very medieval, alchemy. It's such a mystical word too. So, but I didn't really know the ins and outs of alchemy. It's not shit you learn in school or anything. So, I like the explanation here. So, alchemy specifically is transforming something into something else. And the way that Therrien did this was through magic. That's an interesting distinction. Excuse me. That's an interesting distinction that technically alchemy and magic are separate things. But one can be used to create the other, basically. One can be used for the other. Because, once again, in my limited knowledge of alchemy, something, I guess, when you say the word alchemy to me, I did think of, like, maybe this is for lack of a better word, I guess a medieval scientist, basically, like a mystical medieval scientist. That's the kind of imagery I got. Now, not exactly because, Gaius is a scientist in this. He is a medieval scientist. But, I'm thinking of crazy tubes and crap and stuff like that. And, creating... I guess, I did think of, like, okay, it's something about creating or something like that. If you're using a lot of, like, potions or something like that, mystical potions, like, oh, this potion will turn you into a newt. But you'll get better, so don't worry about it. So that I do like the explanation of alchemy, that you can actually use magic to do alchemy. Now, that does not imply that you need magic to do alchemy. This is just how Therrien did it, because Therrien was a sorcerer. He's not an alchemist, he is a sorcerer, so he used what he knew of sorcery in order to do alchemy, basically. I think that's a brilliant idea, because that also opens the door to other alchemists, Which, I guess, at that point, would you consider... I don't think you could consider Gaius an alchemist. No, I wouldn't think so. Because, again, like he said, alchemy is... The way he describes it, alchemy is taking something and transforming it into something else. Gaius doesn't do that. He just does his general science stuff. And, yes, it's medieval, but he is... I get the feeling he is sort of doing things like, yes, this is accurate medieval science, I suppose. So I wouldn't go so far as to say he is an alchemist. But this does open the door. You could bring in actual alchemists in the show if they wanted to, and make the distinction, well, these people aren't sorcerers, they're alchemists, and they, it kind of makes you think, like, if an actual, like, alchemist was on this show, would Uther consider that using magic? I don't think so, because technically it's not, but I don't know. That might be interesting if they, because here's the whole thing is, this whole thing with alchemy is, like, not important to the plot, like, almost whatsoever, with the exception of I will admit, yes, it does start the plot, because, this gets Gwen's dad in trouble, gets Tom in trouble, and it also is sort of the basis of, Therrien's plan, but then they abandon Therrien's plan in favor of Morgana's plan. So we're talking minutes on end about alchemy, when, honestly, it does not matter. So yeah, it was very interesting. So that would be kind of my question. If they brought in an actual alchemist, would Uther be okay with that? Because that's not magic, I suppose. Specifically in this show. I'm not sure, about actual alchemy, I suppose. Maybe put some asterisks next to that, basically. It's like, I don't know if that would be, like, again, historical alchemy, was it magic? In the myths of alchemy, was that, part of it? I don't know. I really don't know. But at least in this show, there is the distinction. In this show, there is the distinction that alchemy and magic are separate, and Therrien used magic in order to perform alchemy. And I like that distinction, that he's using one to do another, basically. Because apparently there's just no magic spell to create gold out of nothing. He has to specifically use alchemy, which is interesting. And to kind of go into that a little bit, there's also the Mage Stone that they brought up, which was the stone that Therrien was using. And that was basically, I guess a magical conduit in order to do the alchemy. I don't know. I'm gonna go back to that part where he's talking about it. No, it's not there. It's earlier than that. Here it is. I'm going to turn on subtitles.
Ancients lost for 1,000 years or more. What does it do? Theoretically, it could give the bearer the power of transformation.
Right.
Go. The power of alchemy. Exactly.
Okay. So the Mage Stone, which is magic, which is interesting because technically, because Therrien is a sorcerer. You know, they said he's a rogue sorcerer, you know, that's trying to kill Uther. Which, fuck, none of them use sorcery. They were all using swords and shit. Which is interesting. Like, none of them were sorcerers. There wasn't... I kind of thought we were going to actually get a sorcerer fight between Merlin and Therrien, but it didn't happen. Okay. So, the Mage Stone can be used for transformation, which is the power of alchemy. Okay, that's a bit different than what I thought it was. But still, technically, I think that is technically still separate. Maybe not. Maybe it's not as separate as I was going on about. But the Mage Stone is definitely magic. You know, he even says.
It was the Mage Stone you sensed on the night of Tom's arrest.
Yeah.
Of course. Gwen said that Therrien is some kind of stone.
Right. Alright. Now I'm going to back this up a little bit.
In 2 days' time, do I make myself find this? Clingwoods at dawn.
Hold up. Oh, I need to catch the beginning of that.
Merlin, come and take a look. I've been doing some research and found this. Mage Stone, wonder of the ancients, lost for 1,000
Okay, so I didn't miss much.
What does it do? Theoretically, it could
Give the bearer the power of transformation.
Go. The power of alchemy. Exactly.
Okay. It could give the bearer the power. So that's why he needed it. That's why he couldn't just do it himself. The Mage Stone, being magic itself, allows the bearer to tap into the powers of alchemy. So alchemy is not exactly science. It is a bit more sorcery. I suppose it's like science magic almost. Although that's the thing, is it is its own thing, as they said, the power of alchemy. It's a separate thing technically. Okay, that's interesting. So that's why he needed it. It's not just that he needed to use magic, but that only this thing could give him that power. As a sorcerer, it gave him the power of alchemy. Interesting. So that's not how you spell alchemy. There we go. Okay, so that's really interesting. I know we just spent, like 10 minutes talking about alchemy, but shit's interesting, so. Okay. Now let's get into the bigger thing in this episode. The law under Uther Pendragon. Now, this whole season, anytime Uther has done anything, I have always been the one to say, you understand why Uther does what he does. And to an extent, you still understand it in this episode. Did Uther go too far? Yes. But this is not exactly... It's not exactly out of character for Uther. That's the thing. You know, this whole time, anytime something has happened, I've always said, you understand why Uther does what he does. They don't portray him... Well, I mean, they somewhat portray... You know, they obviously portray that what he does is bad. But they don't write him to just be a bad guy. That he's just a bad person, he just does shit without any reason. He always has reason, and the reason makes sense. Because everything he does in response to magic comes from the disaster of 20 years ago. The disaster when his wife died because of magic. Which we know now, thanks to Nimue, because Nimue said that. Because of what magic did to him, to his family. It gave him a son, but took his wife away. Because of that, you completely understand why he does what he does. Everything he does is because of the 20 years he has had since the Purge, since the Great Magical Purge. You understand why he does what he does. But, yes, you can still say that what he did went too far. And finally, in this episode, he acknowledges that he went too far. He acknowledges that what he did was wrong. That he regrets what happened to Tom. He now sees that what he did was wrong. So maybe, perhaps he will... I don't know. I mean, I imagine he will still be strict about magic, but I'm thinking... Maybe he won't go as far anymore. Maybe. I think he's starting to learn now. He's starting to learn that sometimes his actions go too far. And it's interesting that was the overarching thing with this episode, is how far should Uther's actions go, and how far do we allow them to go? At what point do his actions need to end, basically? And this is displayed through how he handled the situation with Tom, and how he handled the situation with Morgana. He basically kept pushing Morgana away, and throwing her in the dungeon was definitely a breaking point for her. So yeah. I also wrote down guilty. This is sort of Uther's mentality, is you're guilty if you are in any way related to magic. It's not you're guilty until proven innocent. It's under his law, you are guilty. That's why he executed people that gave Therrien a room, even if they didn't know that Therrien was a sorcerer. He executed them, but maybe now he will slowly back off from that a bit. Maybe he won't, maybe he won't do that. But in this episode especially, he sort of let himself get out of control. So yeah, and he regrets that. He said at the end he regrets doing that. But he needs to be careful, because this mentality is too dangerous. I mean, there was already a group of rogue sorcerers that wanted to kill him, and they had a plan, not the greatest plan in the world, mind you, but they had a plan in place in order to finally take him down. and his actions pushed Morgana over the edge. And you almost stop to think, like, this was Morgana's breaking point. This was Morgana's breaking point. You start to wonder, because... all right, I just thought of this. You start to wonder, what's Arthur's breaking point? Because, hell, we saw Morgana's breaking point. We almost saw Merlin's breaking point, honestly. We almost saw Merlin's breaking point. We did not see Gwen's breaking point, and I don't think she has a breaking point with Uther, because her father was killed. He killed her father, and she still did not break. Merlin almost broke. Luckily, Gwen helped him, but Morgana hit her breaking point. The dragon broke 20 years ago. Let's just be honest. The dragon fucking broke 20 years ago. He's like, fuck Uther, just let him fucking die. Bye. And he flies away with his fucking John Hurt voice. So you do start to wonder with all the cast, like, what is everyone's breaking point when it comes to Uther? Now, Gaius also does not have a breaking point, much like Gwen. Does not have a breaking point when it comes to Uther. For him, Uther will die when he dies. It's just that. He does not... he's even further along. He's further from his breaking point than Gwen is. Because Gwen did say, if Uther dies, I will feel nothing. But she's not to the point where she will actively try to kill him. Merlin came pretty close to his breaking point. Morgana did hit her breaking point and had to come back from it. You do start to wonder, what would Arthur's breaking point be? Because he hates this. Every rash decision that his father makes, Arthur hates it. He does not appreciate this. Executing these people that gave Therrien a room, he hated. Morgana being locked away, he hated. He did everything that he could in order to get Morgana free. Which, technically, Morgana didn't follow through with him. He was like, okay, I spoke to him. I said, you won't question his authority again. And he's like, look, I don't think I can save you next time. Like, this is the extent of what I can do for you. What I can pull. I have 15% power. Shit. We're going to need to... how long? I've only been filming... It's an hour and 13 minutes, but... apparently I was lower on camera space or lower on battery than I thought I was today. Oh well. We'll get through this. So Arthur was like, okay, I don't think I can save you next time. This is it. And what did she do? She still went through with trying... well, she still tried to kill Uther. She tried to kill Uther. Yes, she eventually, she came back after a heart-to-heart, which is interesting. This heart-to-heart that I don't think anyone has ever gotten out of Uther. No one has ever gotten just a conversation out of him, like a deep conversation with him. So yeah, it's all tricky. So we do have the question, does Arthur have a breaking point? First off, he doesn't have a breaking point to where he would kill his father. I don't think that's ever going to be on the table. I don't think that's a thing. But when do you think he will just say enough is enough? Not to the point of killing him again, but when will he just stand... well, but I guess he's already done that. He's already stood up to Uther and been like, no, this is wrong. And he's been thrown in prison for it. Uther has had to lock him up before, so shit, I guess that's Arthur's breaking point. What else do we got? Okay, the whole thing about bribery was dumb. It's not a fucking plan. We're gonna bribe everyone. I guess it's not a horrible plan, technically. I mean, it could happen, but we're gonna bribe everyone, all of his worst enemies, and then have him kill him. Is like, you're a sorcerer, and that's what you came up with? I mean, don't get me wrong, I like that we introduced alchemy. I think that's cool, but it's like, that's what you came up with? We're gonna pay everyone in order to kill Uther? You're a sorcerer, just kill him. Like, am I crazy? He is a sorcerer. They're all sorcerers, and yet they didn't do anything sorcery. They didn't do any sorcery other than using the mage stone. Like, they had swords. He tried to stab Uther. I don't know. Their plan and them, honestly, were kind of weak, but they weren't the focus, honestly, of the episode. It was Uther, Morgana, Gwen, and Merlin. So, yeah. So we have the whole question of, do we kill Uther? The dragon is all on board for it. The dragon is on board for it. Morgana was on board for it. Merlin was going back and forth, but he was starting to lean towards just letting Uther die. Gwen was like, no, I wouldn't kill him. That just makes me as bad as him. And luckily that, snapped Merlin out of it. But, I don't know, man. I don't know. Do you kill Uther? I don't think so. I think you need to let him die naturally. I understand where the dragon comes from, because the dragon knows of what will happen. Okay, I think the dragon thinks that anything has to be better than Uther Pendragon. However, with all of this saying, oh, all of our problems will be fixed without Uther, everyone, Merlin said that, Morgana said that, the dragons said that, it's like, oh, magic will return. But I don't think they quite understand what they're really saying with that. Because what that means is they are putting everything on Arthur. They basically are betting the entire future on Arthur. Granted, we know Arthur is a better man than Uther. Would he be doing half the stuff Uther is doing? No. But you are still putting a lot on Arthur. Gaius even says that. It's like, you can't... Arthur's not ready yet. He's inexperienced. He's not ready to become the king. They're putting everything on Arthur. And yes, technically, the dragon has seen the future. He knows that Arthur should be a good king, but the future can change. The future can change. And we've seen that. We've seen that the future can change. We've seen how this works. And the dragon has taken every opportunity to be like, oh, just let him die. Just let Uther die. But you are putting way too much onto Arthur. Because sometimes I think, if Uther dies because of a sorcerer, Arthur may double down. Arthur may be like, you know what? My father was right. All sorcerers are evil. This just proves it. They killed my father. It all proves it. And now I must uphold my father's values. It's a dangerous gamble on Arthur. Because of how much... yes, Arthur is a good man. Yes, it's true. But at the same time, he has lived with his father. He is the son of his father. And you can't just assume that Arthur is this grand savior. And yes, I understand what show we're talking about. We're talking about King Arthur. The legend of King Arthur. But at the same time, in the context of this story, even the dragon has to be careful of the gamble on Uther Pendrag, on Uther dying and Arthur being the savior. That's still a gamble. And I don't think any of them realize that. And Merlin kept the staff. That's the last thing I wrote down. Merlin kept that staff from a few episodes ago. Which makes sense that, Merlin kept the staff. Merlin is always, displayed, with the robes and the hat and his staff. So I think I was interested. He wasn't blowing fuckers up, I will admit. Probably for the best, though, because, when Therrien, reflected his thing back at him, that would have killed him if he was blowing fuckers up, but he wasn't doing that, luckily. So yeah, I think that's interesting. He also kept the staff, which is a bit harder to conceal than the spell book. So, all right, that's all I got. This was a great episode. We have one episode left of this season before we move on into season 2, obviously. And I'm very curious as to where we go in the next episode. My only guess, it has to be something to do with Nimue. So, we'll see. Hell, who knows? Maybe Uther will die next episode and Arthur will become the king. I don't think it's going to be that easy, though. Especially after this episode. So yeah, that is pretty much it. With all that being said, I'm Alex from 7th Hour Films, and I will see you guys next time. Take care. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. If you want to watch more of my Merlin reactions, you can click on the playlist, you can subscribe if you haven't done that already, and be sure you hit that notification bell. You can support me on Patreon and follow me on social media, links below in the description. See you guys later.